Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the experimental vessel Serendipity, trying to decide if she should laugh or cry. The test of humanity's first quantum probability drive had succeeded beyond their wildest expectations, just not in the way anyone had anticipated. Instead of jumping to the edge of the solar system as planned, they now floated beside what appeared to be the largest space station she'd ever seen. Its gleaming spiral arms stretched out for kilometers, covered in lights that put Earth's biggest cities to shame. And according to their sensors, it was absolutely teeming with alien life. Well, her chief engineer, Marcus Wong, said from his station, breaking the stunned silence, "I guess we can confirm the drive works." Sort of. Sort of is one way to put it, Sarah replied, watching as dozens of sleek vessels emerged from the station's docking bays. Anyone want to bet those aren't the welcoming committee? The massive holographic projection that suddenly appeared in front of their ship answered that question. The alien figure it displayed had too many eyes and what looked like ceremonial armor, but its expression of outraged authority needed no translation. Unauthorized vessels are forbidden in the sacred space of the High Council. UAVCOMMITEDACLS 1 violation of HGE law. Prepare for immediate detention and processing. Transmissions coming in on all frequencies, Captain. Communications Officer Yuki Tanaka reported, fingers dancing across her haptic interface. They're also broadcasting in about 300 different languages. Very thorough bureaucracy that got there. Sarah nodded, mind racing. First contact scenarios had been theorized and planned for decades, but somehow accidentally crashing the galaxy's equivalent of a UN meeting hadn't made it into the training manuals. Right then, let's try not to start an interstellar incident. Open a channel, standard greeting protocols. She straightened her uniform, suddenly very aware that she was about to become humanity's first official representative to alien life. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth research vessel Serendipity. We apologize for our unexpected arrival and any disruption we've caused. We're testing an experimental drive system and seem to have slightly overshot our intended destination. The alien's multiple eyes blinked in rapid succession. Earth is not RAGISTRED in DHEATG money database. Explain your proficiency IMNEDATOI. As I mentioned, we're testing a new form of faster-than-light travel. We're an independent species making our first steps into galactic society. Sarah paused. Though I admit this isn't quite how we plan to introduce ourselves. Unravel species are not permitted to develop faster than light technology without hegemony oversight. This is a Class 2 violation. Prepare for immediate confiscation of your vessel and technology. Marcus snorted. They're not going to like what they find when they try to understand our drive system. He had a point. The quantum probability drive worked by essentially convincing physics that the ship was more likely to be somewhere else. The math behind it had started as a joke in a university physics department before someone realized it might actually work. The prototype had been cobbled together from modified quantum computers, particle accelerators, and what Marcus swore was a repurposed coffee maker. Captain, Yuki cut in. I'm picking up some interesting chatter on their internal frequencies. Seems we've caused quite a stir. Their scientists are particularly interested in how we got past something called the Grand Barrier. Sarah raised an eyebrow. The what now? From what I can piece together, there's supposed to be some kind of energy field preventing unauthorized access to this region of space. We apparently ignored it completely. To prepare for boarding, the alien figure commanded. Resist ANC will be NET with appropriate force. Sarah held up a hand. Before you do anything hasty, you might want to scan our drive system. I suspect you'll find it interesting. There was a pause, then a sweep of energy passed through the ship. The alien's expression shifted to what Sarah could only interpret as confusion. This cannot be EQORDCT. Your derivative configuration defies ALL can outwin laws of proper engineering. It should denote TFUNCTYON. And yet here we are. Sarah replied cheerfully. Would your scientific council be interested in discussing how it works? Though I should warn you, the theoretical physics involved tend to give people headaches. The alien's multiple eyes blinked again, faster this time. You deliberate TLIQ and structured a derivative system based on THEORETIKALMPOSSIBILIT. Edith. Well, technically we constructed it based on a physics joke, but yes, though I prefer to think of them as theoretical improbabilities rather than impossibilities. For several long moments, the alien figure simply stared at them. When it spoke again, its tone had shifted subtly. The High Council requires immediate consultation REGA or DNGPHLS nominator. You will remain in your CURENT position. A hologram vanished. Sarah looked around at her crew, who were all fighting to keep straight faces. Did we just break the galaxy's government with our physics homework? Marcus asked. I think, Sarah replied, watching the growing crowd of vessels surrounding them with a mixture of concern and amusement. We might have done something even worse. She gestured to the station, where more ships were emerging from the docking bays. We made them curious. The next several hours promised to be very interesting indeed. Humanity's first contact might not have gone according to plan, but they'd certainly managed to make an impression. Sarah just hoped the hegemony was ready for the chaos that tended to follow when humans started asking, what if? After all, the quantum probability drive was one of their simpler innovations. Wait until the aliens found out about their AI systems, or their quantum computing networks, or that thing Marcus's team had built last week that they still weren't quite sure what it did. Sarah settled back in her command chair, already composing her report in her head. How exactly does one explain to Earth's governments that humanity had accidentally gate-crashed the galaxy's equivalent of a UN Security Council meeting? At least it would make for an interesting story. Assuming, of course, they didn't end up in alien jail first. The Grand Chamber of the Hegemony High Council had never witnessed such disorder in its 12,000 years of operation. The semicircular rows of seats, normally occupied by perfectly composed representatives of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations, had devolved into what could only be described as controlled chaos. At the center of this unprecedented disruption stood Captain Sarah Chen and her chief engineer Marcus Wong, surrounded by a crowd of increasingly agitated alien scientists. The massive chamber's holographic displays showed incomprehensible equations and diagrams of the Serendipity's drive system, which seemed to offend the very sensibilities of the gathered experts. But you can't just decide physics works differently. Third Scientific Overseer, Kix, insisted, their crystalline form flickering with distress. There are procedures, protocols, centuries of verified theoretical frameworks. Marcus shrugged, pointing to one of the equations. Physics doesn't care about protocols. If the math works, it works. We just had to figure out how to ask the universe nicely to let us bend the rules a bit. Ask the universe. Kix's translator struggled with the concept. That is not how scientific advancement functions. Progress must follow established patterns. Sarah watched as another group of alien scientists argued over a holographic simulation of their drive in action. One of them, a being that appeared to be made entirely of shifting geometric patterns, actually seemed to be having some sort of mathematical breakdown. With all due respect, she interjected, if everyone followed established patterns, wouldn't we all just end up at the same place? The chamber's grand arbiter, an imposing figure with iridescent scales and far too many arms, raised several appendages for silence. The human vessel's violation of our most sacred protocols cannot be ignored. However, they paused, all 6 eyes blinking in sequence. Their achievements raise disturbing questions, like how a species that still uses combustion engines in some of their ground vehicles managed to crack quantum probability manipulation. Marcus suggested helpfully. Several alien scientists made sounds that their translators couldn't quite process. We were going to work up to mentioning that, Sarah muttered. Impossible. The word echoed from multiple translators as the chamber erupted again. A holographic display showed the Serendipity's complete technological profile, which the hegemony scanners had compiled. The resulting data painted a picture that defied their understanding. A civilization that had developed quantum computing before fully mastering fusion power, that had created true AI, while still burning fossil fuels, that had somehow achieved faster-than-light travel while their planetary unified government was still in its infancy. Your species' development pattern is completely chaotic, the Grand Arbiter declared. You have advanced technologies alongside primitive ones, theoretical breakthroughs next to ancient methodologies. This defies all known models of civilizational progress. We like to multitask, Sarah replied diplomatically. She noticed that despite the outrage, many of the younger alien scientists were studying their technology with poorly concealed fascination. Sometimes the best way forward isn't necessarily the most obvious path. You discovered quantum probability manipulation through a joke, Ketz pointed out, their crystalline forms still showing signs of distress. Well, yes, Marcus admitted, but it was a really good joke. Want to hear it? Before anyone could stop him, he launched into an explanation that involved quantum superposition, Schrödinger's cat, and a particularly clever pun about wave-particle duality. The translators struggled valiantly, but somewhere in the middle, 3 alien scientists had to be led away for emergency meditation. Captain Chen. The Grand Arbiter's tone carried centuries of diplomatic weight. Your species presents us with an unprecedented situation. The protocols for first contact are clear, but they gestured at the chaos around them. You have already violated most of them, simply by existing as you do. We get that a lot, Sarah nodded sympathetically. If it helps, we're usually happy to fill out whatever paperwork is needed after the fact. A ripple of what might have been horror passed through the assembled bureaucrats at the casual mention of post facto documentation. The Grand Arbiter's scales shifted through several colors before settling on a troubled mauve. Perhaps, they said slowly, some adjustment to the protocols might be necessary. The words seemed to physically pain them, but Sarah noticed something interesting. The chamber's younger members were showing signs of barely suppressed excitement. One of them was secretly running simulations of the Serendipity's drive system on their personal device, while others were huddled in small groups, discussing the implications in hushed tones. We would be happy to share our research, Sarah offered. Though I should warn you, our scientific papers tend to include jokes in the footnotes. The Grand Arbiter raised all their arms again, this time in what appeared to be resignation. The High Council will need time to process these developments. In the meantime, you will be assigned temporary quarters, and they paused, searching for appropriate diplomatic language. Scientific liaison teams. As they were led from the chamber, Marcus leaned close to Sarah. Did we just get assigned alien babysitters or alien students? Knowing our luck. Sarah watched as a group of young scientists hurried after them, barely maintaining their professional composure. Probably both. Try not to break their understanding of reality too quickly. No promises. Wait until they ask about our AI development program. You know, the one where we taught quantum computers to appreciate cat videos. Sarah sighed. Somehow, she suspected that by the time this was over, the hegemony's precious protocols would never be quite the same. But watching the excited discussions breaking out among the younger aliens, she couldn't help but think that might not be such a bad thing. After all, sometimes the best protocols were the ones flexible enough to bend rather than break. And humanity, if nothing else, was very good at teaching others how to bend. Marcus Wong stared at the massive power core of the hegemony station with the expression of someone who had just found an antique steam engine running a quantum computer. Behind him, a delegation of alien engineers hovered nervously, their various appendages twitching in what he'd learned to recognize as collective anxiety. "Let me get this straight," he said, pointing at the crystalline structure that pulsed with enough energy to power a small planet. "You've been having cascade failures every solar cycle because nobody thought to account for quantum tunneling at the molecular level. The power core design has remained unchanged for 3,000 years. Chief Engineer Zixtal replied, their bioluminescent patches glowing in patterns of distress. "The failure rate is within acceptable parameters according to Protocol 7249b. Acceptable parameters. Marcus watched another surge of energy create a ripple of instability through the crystal matrix. "You're losing enough power to run Earth's entire power grid for a year, every year, because nobody wanted to update the manual." Sarah Chin, who had been quietly observing from the sidelines, recognized the gleam in her chief engineer's eye. It was the same look he'd had right before fixing their quantum drive with spare parts from the mess hall's coffee maker. "Marcus," she said carefully, "remember what we discussed about respecting other cultures' engineering traditions." "But Captain, they're literally burning energy because they're afraid to optimize their own design. He waved his hands expressively. "It's like running a fusion reactor with the safety manual from a coal plant." One of the younger alien engineers, a being named Ix, whose crystalline form showed traces of what Sarah had learned to recognize as rebellious irregularities, moved closer. You believe you can improve upon the sacred core design." "Improve upon?" Marcus was already pulling up holographic schematics, his fingers dancing through the projections. "Look, all you need to do is adjust the crystal lattice structure here, and here. Add some quantum dampeners. We can probably build those from modified communication arrays, and maybe a bit of that nice phase-shifted alloy you use in your ship hulls." Modifying the sacred core design without proper authorization is a violation of Protocol 7249C through Z. Zixtal's bioluminescence had shifted to what Sarah recognized as the alien equivalent of panic. The approval process alone would take 30 cycles. 30 cycles. Marcus looked up from his calculations. "That's like 3 years? The energy you're wasting could power an entire civilization in that time." Sarah watched as several of the younger engineers moved closer to examine Marcus's modifications. Their own bioluminescent patterns showed increasing excitement, though they were clearly trying to hide it from their superiors. "Perhaps," Ix suggested carefully, "we could classify this as an emergency maintenance procedure under Protocol 7249B subsection 47. "That protocol is meant for critical failures only," Zixtal objected, but Sarah noticed they were studying Marcus's calculations with growing interest. "Well," Marcus pointed to the power core's monitoring systems. "According to these readings, you're about 3 days away from a resonance cascade that could theoretically turn this entire sector into a very pretty but very explosive light show." The silence that followed was broken only by the ominous hum of the destabilizing power core. 3 days. Zixtal's translator couldn't quite capture the mix of horror and disbelief in their tone. "Give or take a few hours." Marcus shrugged. "Don't worry, though. We can fix it in about 6 hours with parts you already have. 7 if we stop for coffee breaks." But the procedures. Zixtal's protests were growing weaker as another energy surge caused the monitoring systems to flash warning signals. "Look at it this way," Sarah interjected smoothly. "Would you rather explain to the High Council why you bent the protocols, or why you let their main power core turn into a quantum firework?" The next 6 hours were a blur of activity that would have given any protocol-abiding hegemony engineer a nervous breakdown. Marcus, with the enthusiastic help of Ix and several other young engineers, essentially rebuilt the core's containment system from the ground up. They repurposed quantum communication arrays, modified shield generators, and at one point used what appeared to be the alien equivalent of duct tape, universal bonding material. Ix had insisted. Sarah watched with growing amusement as more and more alien engineers joined the effort, their initial horror giving way to fascination as Marcus's unorthodox solutions proved surprisingly effective. Even Zixtal eventually joined in, though they insisted on documenting everything as emergency procedural variations. There, Marcus stepped back, admiring their handiwork. The power core now hummed with a steady, clean note. The energy readings had stabilized, and the efficiency ratings were 300% improvement. Not bad for a day's work. This is... Zixtal studied the readings, their bioluminescence flickering rapidly. This is impossible. The sacred design cannot be improved upon. And yet, nothing's impossible, Marcus replied cheerfully. Sometimes you just need to look at old problems from new angles. Speaking of which, has anyone ever told you about the human concept of regular maintenance schedules? The sound Zixtal made caused several translator units to short out. Later, as they walked back to their temporary quarters, Sarah gave her chief engineer a sidelong look. You knew about the resonance cascade risk before we went in there, didn't you? Marcus tried to look innocent. Maybe I slightly exaggerated the timeline, but you saw that core. It was a disaster waiting to happen. Besides, he grinned, did you see how excited those young engineers got once they realized they were allowed to actually fix things? Sarah thought about the gleam she'd seen in Ix's crystalline structure, the way the younger engineers had gathered around Marcus like eager students discovering that physics could actually be fun. Just try not to completely revolutionize their entire engineering culture before dinner, she advised. I hear the High Council is still trying to process your quantum probability drive explanations. No promises, Marcus replied. Ix asked me about our AI development programs. Wait until they find out we taught quantum computers to play jazz. Sarah groaned. Somehow she suspected the hegemony's engineering protocols were about to undergo some very interesting emergency modifications. But watching the excited discussions breaking out among the alien engineers, their rigid patterns showing more and more signs of creative irregularity, she couldn't help but smile. Sometimes the best gift humanity could offer wasn't advanced technology, but simply the permission to think differently. Communications Officer Yuki Tanaka was having an interesting day. What had started as a routine cultural exchange briefing had somehow evolved into what could only be described as an interstellar viral phenomenon. I don't understand, she told the holographic projection of Grand Information Curator Vilara. All I did was share some basic entertainment files from our cultural database. Standard first contact protocols. The ethereal being's gossamer form rippled with what might have been exasperation. Officer Tanaka, in the past 12 hours, something called cat videos has spread through our information networks faster than any data package in hegemony history. We've had to shut down 3 primary server hubs due to bandwidth overload. Oh, Yuki tried to keep a straight face. Just wait until they discover dog videos. That is not the point. Vilara's form flickered dramatically. We're also detecting unauthorized modifications to our entertainment protocols. Young members are creating their own versions of these memes. There are reports of spontaneous flash mobs in the residential sectors. Someone has even created something called a remix of our Sacred Harmony of Unity. On her console, Yuki quickly minimized the window showing the latest viral sensation, a surprisingly catchy blend of the hegemony's ancient ceremonial music with earth pop beats. It had already garnered several million views among the station's younger population. I've also received 17,000 requests for access to something called Netflix, Vilara continued. And what, exactly, is a TikTok challenge? Before Yuki could respond, her console lit up with new alerts. The station's information networks were buzzing with activity. Somewhere, someone had started sharing Earth dance tutorials. The resulting videos of various alien species attempting the Macarena were already trending. Perhaps, Yuki suggested diplomatically, this could be seen as a positive cultural exchange. a way to promote understanding between our species. Understanding. Valorous form swirled in patterns of bureaucratic distress. Your species has introduced chaos into our carefully curated information streams. The younger generation is. They paused, as if the words physically hurt, creating content without proper authorization. At that moment, Sarah Chen entered the communications center, took one look at the holographic displays showing the spreading cultural phenomenon, and sighed. What happened? Nothing. Yuki said quickly. I just shared some basic cultural files. For diplomatic purposes. She has corrupted our youth with unauthorized entertainment formats. Valera accused. Look at this. The displays showed various scenes from around the station. A group of young crystalline beings had figured out how to modify their natural luminescence to recreate Earth music videos. Several anti-gravity-capable species were using the station's open spaces to perform elaborate synchronized dances. Someone had even started a station-wide talent show. Is that Ix doing karaoke? Sarah squinted at one of the feeds. They have quite a good voice. Actually, Yuki noted, though I'm not sure how they're managing the high notes with their crystalline resonance. This is exactly the kind of cultural contamination our protocols were designed to prevent. Valera's form was now cycling through various distressed patterns. Your human entertainment is fun, Yuki suggested. Infectious, Valera corrected. It encourages individual expression, creative interpretation, and, they shuddered, spontaneous artistic collaboration. Sarah watched as another feed showed a mixed group of alien species recreating famous Earth movie scenes. They were currently attempting Star Wars, with interesting improvisations based on their various biological capabilities. You know, she said thoughtfully, trying to stop the spread of human culture might be like trying to stop entropy. It just kind of happens. But the protocols. Have you considered, Yuki interrupted gently, that maybe your people want this? Look at them. They're not just copying our culture, they're adapting it, making it their own. That's not contamination, that's creativity. Valera's form wavered uncertainly. The High Council will not be pleased. Probably not, Sarah agreed. But from what I've seen, they haven't been pleased since we arrived. At least this time, people are having fun while breaking protocols. A new alert flashed across the screens. Someone had just uploaded a compilation of Hegemony's funniest home videos. It was going viral faster than the station's quantum networks could track. Besides, Yuki added, you have to admit some of these are pretty good. Did you see the one where the gravitational species recreated The Floor is Lava? Made excellent crisis soundtracks. Ready. Marcus called from his position near the modified power core. Though I should mention this has about a 60% chance of working. And the other 40%? The Grand Arbiter asked. Either nothing happens, or we accidentally turn the station into a quantum art installation. Either way, better than the void entities. Sarah looked at the sensor feeds. The dark spots were getting closer, reality warping around them. Do it. The modified power core hummed to life, but instead of its usual steady tone, it seemed to be playing jazz. Quantum probability fields extended from the station in patterns that shouldn't have been possible, reality itself bending around them in ways that made mathematics cry. The void entities hit the field and bounced. It's working. Ix's crystal structure was practically vibrating with excitement. The quantum probability inversions are forcing them to exist in our reality, which means we can hit them. Sarah realized. All weapons target the entities. Their physics have to work normally now. The battle that followed would have been impossible just weeks ago. The station's weapons, modified with human chaos theory and alien precision, fired in patterns that looked random but followed their own strange logic. Young alien operators, trained in human video games, proved remarkably good at targeting entities that sometimes existed in multiple places at once. And through it all, the power core played jazz, its quantum harmonics somehow perfectly matching the chaos of the battle. When it was over, when the last void entity had been forced into normal space and dealt with, the Grand Arbiter turned to Sarah with all 6 eyes blinking in sequence. "Your species," they said slowly, "is either brilliant or insane." "Probably both," Sarah admitted, "though I like to think that's what makes us interesting." Looking around the chamber, she could see the changes their brief stay had catalyzed. Young aliens were freely mixing human and hegemony technology, creating hybrid systems that shouldn't have worked but did. The rigid protocols had been replaced by what Marcus called structured chaos, enough order to keep things running, enough freedom to allow innovation. "You realize," Vilera mentioned, their form showing amusement, "someone has already turned the battle footage into something called a music video." "Of course they have." Sarah laughed. "Let me guess. It's gone viral." "With remixes," Yuki confirmed. "Also, I think Ix's karaoke version of "We Will Rock You" is trending." The Grand Arbiter's scales had shifted to a new color, one that Sarah had never seen before. "The High Council will need to reassess certain traditions," they admitted. "Perhaps some protocols could be more flexible." "That's the spirit," Marcus grinned. "Speaking of flexibility, wait until you see what happens when we introduce your quantum computers to human social media." Several translator units chose that moment to spontaneously shut down, perhaps in self-defense. As the celebration began, another human tradition, the younger aliens had enthusiastically embraced. Sarah watched her crew mingling with their alien counterparts. Humanity's accidental first contact might not have gone according to any protocol, but maybe that was exactly what the galaxy needed. After all, sometimes the best way to face an uncertain universe was with a smile, a bad joke, and the willingness to try something that probably shouldn't work, but just might anyway. "Captain," Yuki called, "they want to know if we can teach them something called the wave." Sarah grinned. The cultural contamination, it seemed, was complete, and the galaxy would never be the same.